Amidst the dust of a sun-baked prairie, Sarah Bennett stands heartbroken and rejected, clutching her children as her in-laws shut the door in her face. Betrayed and alone, whispers of despair echo around her. She finds hope with a humble cowboy, but what happens next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The sun hung low in the expansive sky, casting long shadows over the fields as Sarah Bennett stood at the threshold of her small wooden cabin. The wind carried with it a faint scent of the prairie, a bittersweet reminder of the life she once shared with her husband, Thomas. Ever since a tragic accident claimed his life, each new dawn had become a test of endurance, a battle between despair and determination. Her eyes, though weary, still glimmered with the stoic resolve that had seen her through countless hardships. She gently pulled her shawl closer against the evening chill, clinging to its warmth as thoughts of a secure future for her two young sons swirled in her mind. Inside, the boys, Nathan and Eli, aged 7 and 5, respectively, played with their crafted wooden toys. Their laughter, innocent and unfettered, filled the room with a sense of normalcy that Sarah reached for but couldn't quite grasp. Even in their play, she saw reflections of their father's spirited nature and kind-heartedness, a testament to the love and life they had built together on this unforgiving land. But the stark reality of their situation gnawed at her heart. The isolation, the dwindling supplies mirrored in the bare pantry, and the encroaching winter that threatened to choke the life from the land itself. With a deep breath, Sarah turned to the small, nondescript desk littered with loose papers, ink, and a quill. Her heart raced as she began to pen a letter she had never imagined she'd have to write. Her words echoed the soft rustle of paper, each stroke deliberate, laden with unspoken plea and silent hope. The letter was addressed to Thomas's family, people she had yet to meet, only having known them through stories and photographs. In her words, she poured out the essence of her predicament, a widow with young children, stripped of her partner and protector, seeking refuge with the only family they had left. As she wrote, she paused frequently to compose herself, ensuring each line encapsulated honesty without veering into desperation. It was a delicate dance within her prose, one that balanced dignity with need. She spoke of Thomas's love for his kin, weaving tales of his affection for his heritage, underscoring her earnest wish to honor his memory by bringing his sons closer to their roots. Every sentence dripped with sincerity, her hand occasionally trembling under the weight of hopes pinned on paper. Outside, the dying light of the prairie painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a serene contrast to the turmoil within her chest. She prayed silently, offering her words to the vast heavens above, sealing the letter with a mixture of reverence and apprehension. As she folded the paper with care, sealing it with wax and her final prayers, Sarah knew that this act was more than just a reach for assistance. It was an appeal for family, for belonging, and for a glimmer of salvation amid the uncertainties of life. Thus, with a heart brimming with both anticipation and trepidation, she entrusted her message to the winds of destiny. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the parched ground as Sarah Bennett stood before the modest wooden mailbox by the roadside. With trembling hands, she grasped the thin envelope, her heart teetering on the edge of hope and fear. This letter, she believed, held the promise of refuge, a sanctuary for her and her children after months of uncertainty and silent struggles. Sarah tore it open with tentative hands, the paper crinkling under her touch as she scanned the brief lines penned in her sister-in-law's sharp, dismissive scrawl. The words were cold and unyielding, as though they had been carved from ice. "No room for charity cases," it said, like a sentence handed down without appeal. Each word struck like a hammer, shattering the fragile shell of hope that had tenuously shielded her heart. The rest of the world seemed to fall away as she stood there, stunned and alone, buffeted by the sudden chill of rejection. Beneath the southern sun's relentless glare, Sarah felt an internal frost creep through her veins, turning her limbs leaden with disbelief. Her mind, a whirl of disbelief and burgeoning grief, refused to accept the stark reality her eyes beheld. With a strangled breath, she glanced around, as if seeking some sign from the heavens to offer solace or guidance. But the world remained indifferent, its silence as damning as the letter clenched in her hand. As the first wave of anguish ebbed, it was replaced by the slow, creeping tide of humiliation. News of her family's disdain spread through their tight-knit community with the efficiency of a summer wildfire. Where once there were eyes cast in sympathy, they now turned away, or, worse, watched with veiled curiosity, intent on the spectacle of her disgrace. Sarah could almost feel the weight of those stares pressing down upon her, each one a reminder of her new place in the community's hierarchy. As an outsider, a pitiable figure struggling beneath the burden of her own misfortune. Her heart ached in response to the isolation that now defined her existence, as if parted from some vital element that sustained her. The fabric of her life, already threadbare from countless trials, seemed to unravel further with each passing day. Sarah's mind drifted to her children, their trusting faces peering up at her, seeking security and answers she no longer felt capable of providing. Fear gnawed at her resolve, whispering insidiously of failure and the impending collapse of the fragile world she had fought so hard to hold together. Yet amid the despair, a flicker of defiance sparked within her. Sarah straightened her shoulders beneath the weight of her grief and despair, gathering the fractured remnants of her spirit. Though the path ahead was obscured by shadows, she resolved to tread it with dignity, driven by an unyielding love for her sons and a determination to build something better out of the ashes of what had been denied to her. The sun cast long shadows over the sprawling landscape, painting the rugged terrain in hues of gold and amber as Sarah Bennett toiled in the field under its waning glow. The day had been filled with relentless labor, the kind that only the toughest souls could endure day in and day out. The life she once knew was worlds away, replaced by the solitude of the prairie and the steady rhythm of toil that demanded both resilience and fortitude. Her hands, once familiar with softer duties, now bore calluses, silent testimonies to her determination and will to provide for her children, Tom and Eli. What sustained her through these arduous days was the promise of a burgeoning season, not only of crops, but of her own tenacity and hope for a fresh start. Amidst the vast expanse, a figure emerged in the distance. Jake Miller, walking with an ease that spoke of his alliance with the land. He was a cowboy whose stoic demeanor belied a kind heart and observing spirit. Though words seldom found him, his actions stitched a narrative that spoke volumes. It was Jake who, without expectation, extended an offer of shelter to Sarah. A humble roof over her head, shared with her two boys, a place she could perhaps call home. It was a kindness she had not anticipated, especially not from a man who had no obligations to her or her children. At the ranch house, evenings were painted with a serenity Sarah had thought forever lost. The house itself was modest. Weathered wood creaked underfoot, and the air held the scent of age and durability. But it was more than shelter. It was a canvas for new beginnings. Meals were simple yet satisfying, with the warmth of shared bread and laughter filling the space with a feeling of belonging. Jake would often rise before dawn, leaving the house with the first whisper of sunrise to tend to the cattle. In these moments, Sarah found herself watching his silhouette through the window, feeling a sense of quiet gratitude for this man who, without flamboyance or demand, had extended a palm in her storm. Sarah's boys adapted quickly. Tom, the older of the two, had even taken to shadowing Jake, mimicking his movements and absorbing his quiet wisdom. And where words were sparse, Jake taught through deeds, allowing Tom to fumble through lassoing techniques or aiding him in the mending of fences. Eli, with an endless array of questions, found in Jake's considered answers constancy and patience, filling gaps left by the absence of their father. This growing camaraderie gently pulled Sarah into its folds. She found herself laughing at their shared meals, a sound unfamiliar and yet comforting to her ears. The heaviness that had nestled in her heart started to lift, swapped for a sense of belonging she feared was out of reach. Jake, with his understated demeanor, had offered more than shelter. He had granted Sarah space to heal, to redefine family, and to nurture the seedlings of trust and affection that had begun to take root. Sarah realized that in this unassuming man and his rustic life, she had found more than just a refuge. She had discovered the framework for a new beginning. In the gentle embrace of twilight, the small town of Copper Ridge gathered for the annual Harvest Festival, an event where time seemed to slow down, allowing neighbors to reconnect and celebrate their shared labors. The air was filled with the scent of ripe apples and freshly baked pies, casting a warm and inviting glow over the gathering. Children chased one another through the hay bales, their laughter echoing like a sweet melody against the backdrop of the setting sun. Sarah Bennett stood at the periphery of the bustling crowd, her heart a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. Her boys, Johnny and Tommy, were already lost in the gammies with other children, their giggles a balm to her weary soul. Her eyes drifted to Jake Miller, who was in animated conversation with the townfolk. Jake, with his unassuming presence and quiet dignity, had become more than just a benefactor to Sarah and her boys. He was the cornerstone of the second chance life had offered them. Their journey over the past months had been one of subtle transformation, as steady as the ticking of a clock. There had been no grand gestures, no dramatic confessions. Instead, it was in the small things, Jake taking an extra shift to ensure there was enough for dinner, Sarah mending his shirts despite her fingers being raw from work, that forged their bond. Each shared task knitted together a life of humble abundance and profound understanding. As the evening wore on and the festival lights twinkled like earthbound stars, the mayor took the stage to commence the night's festivities. To everyone's surprise, he invited Jake up for a few words. Jake ascended awkwardly, his hands shoved into his pockets, face flushed with the attention. Clearing his throat, he searched the crowd until his gaze found Sarah. It was a look that spoke volumes of unspoken words. "Folks," he began, voice steady yet resonant like a well-struck chord, "I've come to know Sarah and her boys these past months. They've shown resilience and strength I can't rightly put into words. Today, I feel something needs saying in front of y'all. Sarah isn't just a friend, she's family. Johnny and Tommy, too. We're all building a life, and it wouldn't be the same without them. I reckon it's high time everyone knows that." A wave of murmurs swept the crowd, but not a single word was of derision or scorn. Instead, there were nods of understanding and appreciation. The announcement, simple and direct, was a revelation not just for Sarah, but for the community that had been somewhat complicit in her initial isolation. It was a moment of catharsis and redemption, a public acknowledgement of her tenacity and grace. A tear slid down Sarah's cheek, unbidden but not unwelcome. She intertwines her fingers with Jake's, her voice barely a whisper carried by the night breeze. "You reminded me of who I am," she confided, the words a verdant bridge over the gap that had once separated her past from her present. As dawn broke the next day, casting a halo of gold over the sleepy town, the collective realization dawned on Sarah and the community alike. Resilience was a powerful force, and love, in its quiet, enduring forms, the deepest of graces.